Well, and one thing I love that you chose to do, I imagine pretty strategically, is this movie doesn't shy away from being sexy. You have these intimate scenes and they're beautiful, and you actually feel like you're watching a couple having a loving moment. And sometimes I feel like in content that's for the queer community, you kind of get the watered down version of that. And you don't always get to see those moments of true, deep, passionate love. Was that something important for you to show between the two gentlemen?
Deeply, deeply. I think, one of two things usually ends up being true, not always. And those other movies and those other scenes stand out as a result. But either it's a scene that is, you can tell it's a straight filmmaker making the scene, or you know that it's a straight audience for whom the scene is being ultimately considered. And it's sort of like, generally, I think in the past, a lot of it is, especially in studio movies, a lot of it is, don't scare the straights. And there was none of that on this film. And I don't know if it was because, I don't know why, but I did not get any resistance to my plans for this thing. I also made it very clear at the beginning. I said, if you hire me, this is going to be in the movie. So if you don't want it to be in the movie, you should find somebody else to make this film. And I was very upfront about it because I didn't want to have any arguments later. And what was really important to me is I really wanted to do two things, which I hadn't seen much of in film. I wanted to show two men having sex in a way that is loving, that is connected, that is pleasurable, and that is beautiful. And I also wanted to film a sex scene whose geography and whose physical execution of makes sense to people who know how to have gay sex. And so I needed it to both be incredibly accurate physically, and I also needed it to be incredibly to the point where we are in the story. I needed it to be focused on the characters. I needed it to be focused on their journey. And so we applied both seemingly oppositional desires to the scene, and it ended up being the scene that's in the film.
Yeah, well, they're beautiful scenes. I'm happy you stuck to your instinct and your guts on that. I was surprised that the movie, and I know you share the same sentiment, got a rated R, I guess because of the sex scenes, but that surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, I say it surprised me, and then also it didn't surprise me. It's sort of like, I think in the perfect world that maybe sometimes still exists in my head, it surprised me. And then in the reality that I live in, it didn't. It's like not surprising at all. I think that it's two things. It's, if it had been a man and a woman, if it hadn't been a gay couple, I really don't think that scene would have garnered the R rating. But let's even pretend that maybe it would have. What is more depressing to me, actually, is the fact that it is sexuality that got us the R rating. And you can name a dozen movies that are incredibly violent, far more violent movies than my film is sexual, that are PG-13. So I think even if you set aside latent homophobia or overt homophobia, you're still left with the problem that the MPAA favors violence over sexuality. They prefer American audiences see acts of violence than acts of love.
Jeez.
And that's really fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think that it may be overdue for a reassessment of the use of the MPAA. I don't know what its function is anymore. And I think it might be a little outdated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, which is all the more reason why a movie like this is important with the choices you made artistically, because it's going to show people that this is content people want to see and they're going to line up to see it. And there's no problem with it. So,
yeah. We aren't living in the same country that we did when the MPAA was
right.
And I feel like the standards are still being applied to Probably, I would imagine the 1960s or early 70s is when the MPAA was probably founded. I don't know that off the top of my head, but we're not living in that world anymore. And I don't see anything in this film that actually anybody who isn't at least 13 couldn't watch.
Yeah.
So, but hey, that's me. What do I know?
No, I agree. I think it's a film for everybody. And like I said, I'm glad you made the choices you made. Matthew, I imagine doing a movie like this is so gratifying on a million different levels and in a million different ways. But personally, what did you learn about yourself through making your very first movie like this?
Well, I learned that I could get by on a lot less sleep than I ever imagined. I think that Hollywood has for the last several years been going through a reassessment of what is acceptable behavior for people with power. And there is no person in Hollywood at a certain point in any filmmaking process more powerful on any given day than the director of a film. And my two mentors in this business were Stephen Daldry and Tom Fontana, who's one of the great TV showrunners. And they both operate in the world from a place of kindness. Mm. And they operate in this world from a place of really wanting to help people do their best work. And when you're working with Stephen or you're working with Tom, you're working hard, but you're always valued. You're always asked how you're doing, and you're always having fun. And it was something that I think I maybe unconsciously brought with me into the process of doing this. And there were days when I was frustrated. There were days when I got angry. There were days when something didn't work and it was somebody's fault, and you could actually find someone to blame for it. And my instincts always in this time of stress are to get angry. But my actions, I learned, were much more effective if I didn't. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to be awful. And it is so hard sometimes to be kind. And yet I discovered through exercising the lessons that I learned from Stephen and Tom on hopefully a daily basis that you really, really do get the best work out of people if you create a warm, loving, safe environment for them. You can push them harder to do scarier things. You can make something that is seemingly impossible possible. Mm-hmm. Weirdly, I also think it saves you time. So I learned about myself that my mentors were right, and that I also learned about myself that I have more of a capacity to be understanding of people than I ever imagined. And I know that sounds like I'm in some ways boasting or tooting my own horn or whatever, but I think if anybody who knows me knows that I'm pretty driven, and I can be tough, and I can be tough on myself. But I hope also that people know that I hope I have a reputation for being loving and kind and caring. And that battle within anybody between those two instincts, I sort of wage that internally on this movie, and love always wins.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I love that. What a great,
oh, good.
I do. What a great realization to have through doing your work. That's so cool. And I think, man, we all need to tap into more of the kindness thing in this world and society. It's very important.
Yeah. It would be nice. It would be really nice. And it applies in all things and in all ways, and not just in this business. And it applies to our discourse and the way we treat other people on social media, the way we treat other people at the supermarket.
Right. Everywhere. Yeah. Right on with that. Matthew, the last question for you is based off the title of this show, which is I've never said this before. So I would love to know something that you have never said before that you would like to share. It can be deep, it can be silly, it can be anything you want.
I've never said this before, but I used to want to be president of the United States.
Did you really?
I really did. When I was about between the ages of about 15 and 17, maybe 18, I just fell so passionately in love with politics. And I read the New York Times at that age, and I watched CNN constantly. And I just wanted to be, if not president, then like proximal to the president, or maybe a senator or a congressman. I just wanted to be in politics. And then I discovered that I liked kissing guys. And at that time in my life, in that time in this country's life, I knew, well, I could either kiss guys or run for president. And the boys won. What can I say? So it's funny because when I was thinking about that question, I was trying to figure out how to answer. And I remember giving an interview about being on the Oval Office set. And I remember actually sitting behind the desk at, before work one day, and just thinking, I remembered in that moment how I had these dreams of like, I wanted to go to law school. I planned it all. I was going to get into politics. And then, summer of 95 happened, and I just...
Well, I mean, you can never say never though, right?
Sure, never say never. I'd rather maybe make donations to queer candidates and let other people do that themselves.
Fair enough. That's an awesome answer. So were you geeking extra hard at Uma Thurman as president?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? It was like, I think Uma and I were both geeking together about it. Like, Uma would never say this, but I saw her sit behind that desk, and she sort of like, she had an idea or two about what she could do after this movie. I think that what I absolutely can say, even on a soundstage in London, you walk into even an approximation of the Oval Office, and you really do feel this immense sense of power, this immense sense of history. And I mean, it was like plywood and like fake, like really cheap carpeting. And yet still you can't help but be awed, but I do think that Ellen has a much better sense of style than Joe Biden.
I would agree. Well, listen, if in a few years from now, 10 years, 20 years, I see your name in the race, I'm going to pull this interview and say, see.
You do. And then I'm going to come to you for big donations.
All right. Fair enough. Matthew, this was awesome. I like I said, I love the movie. You did a fantastic job. I think you're such a brilliant artist. As we close out the episode, tell people when, how, where, how to watch this film, all the things.
Red, White, and Royal Blue on Amazon Prime starting August 11th, everywhere in the world.
Amazing. Thank you, my friend. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate talking to you. Thank you.